Hi, so my name is Victoria Clowater. I'm going to be giving my presentation, Pokemon Go as Palimpsest, Creating Layers of Meaning at the University of Guelph. This is based on research that I did in the second year of the Master's in Public Issues Anthropology program at Guelph. And it was based on research I conducted for my methods class in my first year of that program. This presentation is from Engage, a grad student conference hosted by graduate students at the Sociology and Anthropology Department at the University of Guelph. And I am expecting my article on this research to come out in the end of November 2021. So by the time this video is posted, it should be out, and I will link it in the section below. So in this presentation, I'm going to look at the relationships with place and space, which are mediated through technology. I use ethnographic data from student Pokemon Go players at the University of Guelph to illustrate how augmented reality gaming constructs a curated layer of place meaning and how this influences players' knowledge of relationships to and movement through space, and what the impacts of that can be. So Kranzberg's first law of technology is that technology is neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral. In this presentation, I show how Pokemon Go influences how players come to know and experience place, as well as what makes a place, to show how Pokemon Go's influence on our relationships to place and space is neither good nor bad nor neutral. I argue that we should examine what constitutes quote, culturally or historically significant place through the eyes of Pokemon Go, and what types of places and worldviews might be excluded by this definition, and what that means when we live in a settler colonial state. For those that are unfamiliar with Pokemon Go and with augmented reality gaming, here is an overview. So Pokemon Go is a mobile game created by game developer Niantic, who is owned by Google. The term augmented reality means that the game incorporates real-world features and environments into the game world, rather than creating an entire virtual world, of the kind that might exist in a game like Skyrim or The Legend of Zelda, or even the other Pokemon games that came out on, in my day, classic platforms like Game Boy, but there's all sorts of games and platforms nowadays. You can see an example of the augmented reality landscape that I'm talking about in the screenshot on the right of this slide. So this is a screenshot of my phone screen as I played Pokemon Go on the Guelph University campus. If you look at the top of the photo, for those who are familiar with the Guelph campus, you will see the South residences, those light blue overlapping V or Y-shaped buildings. The purple Pokestop in the center is at the corner of the engineering building, and to the right of that is the university center. So this gives you an idea of what the game world looks like and how it incorporates the physical world into the game screen. The game uses your phone's GPS signal to place you on this map. You may be able to see my avatar in the middle of the cluster of Pokemon. So you can see where I was standing when I took this screenshot, right outside the engineering building in the main quad. Players can interact with real-world spaces through the game screen. You can spin Pokestops. So the center Pokestop in this picture is purple rather. You can see one to the side that is purple just on the left, one a little higher up from that one that is blue. So they're purple because I just spun them. You click on, you'll see an image later that gives you an idea of what that might look like, but basically you click on that purple object, a new screen comes up, you would spin it and it spins around and it gives you items such as Pokeballs. And you use these Pokeballs to catch the Pokemon you encounter. So those Pokemon that are all around me on the screen. And you would use those Pokemon that you catch to battle in the gyms. There is a gym on this screen. It's sort of cut off on the right-hand side, but it's light blue. So you can see that there. The game is very popular on campus, or sorry, it's not light blue. It's as blue as blue can be, but that would be a gym dominated by the blue team. So the game's very popular on campus. Lots of students and staff would regularly play it when the campus was still open before COVID. So as a player myself, I was new to campus in 2000, or 2019, and I used the app to explore campus. I spent time doing work in places that were beneficial to my Pokemon gameplay. For this research project, I wanted to know the impact of the app on other players. Did the game influence how they knew the campus and where they went on campus? Based on these experiences, I developed my research question. Does Pokemon Go on a university campus provide meaningful relationships to place and space? To explore this question, I looked at literature on the anthropology of place, the anthropology of video games and virtual worlds, and also non-anthropological literature on Pokemon Go. There was a limited amount of anthropological literature on the game, as well as anthropological engagements with the game outside of the scholarly literature. For instance, the Society for Cultural Anthropology's podcast, Anthropod, did an episode on Pokemon Go that was foundational for my research. The biggest gap in the literature on Pokemon Go was that most of the studies were conducted in what might be called the Pokemon Go summer, so around July 2016. And that's when the app was first launched. Many people played it then. People probably remember that summer, even if you didn't play it. Many of those initial players have now dropped off, and the ways that people play the game have changed. The game also has introduced new features, such as the ability to allow players to submit their own locations to be included in the game world as Pokestops. So I wondered, what does Pokemon Go gameplay look like now? How does it differ from what was documented in those initial studies? How has the game been incorporated into players' lives? And what are the impacts of all this? So to explain how Pokemon Go might influence place meaning, I use the concept of the palimpsest of meaning to demonstrate how Pokemon Go can shape place meaning and experiences in place. Marvel and Sim describe the palimpsest as, quote, an ancient manuscript that has been overwritten with more recent text, but the older text can be seen showing through. And so I provided an image of what that might look like on the right so you can see. There's obviously faded text going vertically, horizontally, more faded text over top of that, and then at the bottom rather, vertically more. So the palimpsest framework has been applied to a variety of contexts in the social sciences. I use one framework for doing this, which comes from archaeologist Jeff Bailey, who defined several types of palimpsest that go beyond the original manuscript definition. One such type of palimpsest is the palimpsest of meaning, an object that acquires a series of meanings through different uses. He gives the example of Stonehenge, which is not only a Neolithic, quote, not only a Neolithic and Bronze Age monument, but also an Iron Age one, a medieval one, and a modern one, end quote, with different meanings in each of these periods. I see different spatial frameworks or different ways of knowing place as layers in a palimpsest. And so the palimpsest of meaning is a useful means to interrogate how Pokemon Go reiterates place meaning through the lens of Niantic, the game's creator. The digital landscape of Pokemon Go shows only traces of the real world. So you see in this slide an in-game map of a place that actually physically exists, but the landscape and the buildings are flattened. Real world locations, though, are embedded in game in the form of these blue Pokestops. This is the Pokemon Go's layer of meaning, and it's a shared layer for players. And on the next slide, I'm just going to show a picture of a Confederate flag, and I will get to that, but I just wanted to let you know in advance that is coming up because I don't mention it right away on the next slide. So what makes a place in Pokemon Go, and what are the implications of these logics of placemaking? What is important when we think about the Pokemon Go palimpsest layer is that the possible locations that might exist in the game are constrained by the game maker's parameters for what makes a viable in-game location. So how are these locations determined? The determination of whether or not to include a location in-game is based on the location's perceived historical or cultural significance. So to submit a new location, players must take pictures and submit it on a web platform called Wayfarer. There, the submission is assessed by other players for its historical or cultural significance, its conformance to Niantic's guidelines, before it is approved and added to the game. And that can take quite a while, especially if there's not consensus amongst the reviewers. I submitted one place that I knew was a good Pokestop, but might be a hard sell for the reviewers, and it's been there for over a year. So it's a slow process. It's an especially slow process if there's not consensus. So places that are interpolated into Pokemon Go's virtual reality, so brought into the reality in the form of Pokestops, are generally those that have already been recognized as culturally or historically significant according to the dominant narrative of place. So these must be permanent landmarks. They can't be part of nature. So no trees or rivers, even if they are historically or culturally significant, but monuments are fine. So where I'm from, New Brunswick, the main river in New Brunswick is Wolastoq, but known to some people as the St. John River, but its proper name is Wolastoq. And it's a very important river to the local Wolastoqiyug, which is also known as Maliseet, but they prefer to be called Wolastoqiyug, which are the people. So Wolastoq means the beautiful and bountiful river. And so Wolastoqiyug is the people of the beautiful and bountiful river. And that river, though culturally significant in that area, would not be able to be put into the game map. It would be represented in the game map. As you can see in this previous slide, there are buildings, there is grass, there are roads. So it would be represented with a blue streak, but it would, you couldn't put a Pokestop in. So I just want to make sure I didn't read this. So what's important when we think, and I apologize if I've read this before, what's important when we think about the Pokemon Go Palimpsest layer is that the possible locations that might exist in the game are constrained by the game maker's parameters for what makes this viable in-game location. Yeah, I did read you all of that. So places that are, so whose ways of knowing place are excluded by these logics. This approach ignores versions of placemaking place meaning that might be prevalent among historically marginalized groups, and it favors dominant white Western ways of knowing place. So it's important to understand how the game influences players' knowledge of and relationships to place, because as Kranzberg's law states, the technology is not neutral in this case. It isn't necessarily good or bad, but its effects aren't neutral. Highlighting a particular culture's way of knowing place is not a neutral act. So I've included in this image to the right of the slide, a flagpole that is in Pokemon Go. It's a monument to Confederate soldiers. These types of Pokestops proliferate in the southern United States. Here in Toronto, which is where I live, there's a statue of Sir John A. Macdonald just outside the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, and that has become a Pokestop. That statue has become a point of contention in recent years because of Macdonald's key role in initiating a genocide of Indigenous people in Canada. So whose story is told in public becomes an important consideration, especially when we ask ourselves, who has access to public memorialization? For instance, Carter shows how Black placemaking in New Orleans is challenged by those in power. A direct result of that is that Black history is not as memorialized in public as other histories. And that stands out in contrast to how monuments to colonial power are part of the colonial project, and they serve to support the dominance of those in power at the detriment of those who aren't in power. So by illustrating how Pokemon Go influences relationships to place, I show how it might influence place knowledge in a way that's not neutral. My research comprised interviews with 5 Guelph students who played Pokemon Go. In these interviews, I asked them about their gameplay and about how the game connected them to other players, about how the game influenced their movement on campus, their knowledge of place and other behaviors. My research was conducted in the winter semester of 2020. In March of 2020, as I'm sure we all know, a shelter-in-place order took effect in Ontario because of COVID-19. So I was not able to conduct participant observation or naturalized observation. I do see participant observation as a great area for future research on Pokemon Go and its relationship to people in place. So now in the immortal words of Pokemon Go's Professor Willow, let's see what we've discovered. So I've argued that Pokemon Go influences players' awareness of, engagement with, and relationships to place. On this slide, as many of you know, if you're familiar with Guelph campus, is an image of the Bull Ring, a coffee shop on campus. And many of you might recognize Tauros, one of the original 150 Pokemon. So the Bull Ring, of course, is a logical place to find a Tauros. It used to be a place where they would, if I understand correctly, where they would show livestock, and now it's a coffee shop. A participant said that a favorite activity of hers was to use the augmented reality photo feature to place Pokemon in the real world, in locations that made sense for them or which matched their color scheme. So this activity structured a lot of her free time and guided her exploration of new and known environments. Here's another example. Smeargle, pictured here, is a prankster Pokemon, as well as an artist. So to represent that, I took a picture of him just after he graffitied the cannon. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Guelph campus, this cannon is in the main quad, actually right next to the Bull Ring almost. And it is a hobby of Guelph students to paint the cannon every night. So some days that you will go and you will find that the cannon changes every day. It was like this for a while, I think almost the whole summer. Because the campus was so empty because of COVID and most of the students had gone home. So that's a local Guelph culture thing. And so here was an example of how I used Pokemon Go to be creative and to explore in place, and also how augmented reality can inspire new experiences in place. So here's an example of a Pokestop. So as I mentioned, when you click on the Pokestop, you get a new image and you can spin that image and get items. So this would be what happens when you click on one of those boxes that are floating, and you can see it's purple, so I just spun it. So this is the statue, a statue on campus. And if you are familiar with Guelph campus, I want you to take a look at it and think if you might recognize it from somewhere on campus. So this is where the statue is. It is behind the bookstore. It is right next to the geography building. The statue was a common theme in discussions with participants. So some participants didn't know that it existed before they started playing. Others saw it, thought, hey, that kind of looks like a butt. And when they started playing, the meaning and importance of the statue solidified. As the image on the left indicates, this statue is a Pokestop, one of the in-game locations that you can get items from. And in-game, the name of this statue is the backside statue. So because that is the name of the statue, that's how players came to know it. I spent a lot of time in the summer of 2020 trying to figure out the actual name of this statue. It's right next to the McNaughton building. Inside the McNaughton building, there's lots of pieces of artwork. And all of that artwork has plaques, but I couldn't find a plaque for this statue. I couldn't find any information online either. So because this information is not available, players are left with the in-game interpretation of this, and you're allowed to give a tongue-in-cheek name to a location. So the fact that this is called the backside statue becomes how this part of campus is known to players. So now that Pokemon Go has been out for almost 5 years, it's been integrated into players' lives in a variety of ways. Several participants spoke of how they played the game during their commute, whether they were taking the bus to campus or walking across campus while interacting with Pokestops. So commuting is generally thought of as a liminal space or a liminal activity, a waiting period between destinations. Because commuting entails movement, it's an ideal time to play Pokemon Go. So players who are walking, biking, or taking public transit can visit multiple Pokestops in a relatively small amount of time. And another benefit to this is that more Pokemon spawn in the game when you are moving. You only get a few spawns if you're playing while sitting still. And of course, spawns are important because they help you catch Pokemon. You need to catch Pokemon to level up. And so the more Pokemon you catch, the better. So the commute can be so valuable to Pokemon Go players' gameplay that it can affect how participants commuted to campus. One participant noted that the game could change how she commuted and could modify even the objectives of her commute. The most efficient route from her place to campus was the local walking path, but she chose to take a longer route to campus as that would have enabled her to access more Pokestops. In addition to influencing patterns of behavior, the game also influenced players to make sporadic changes. Peter spoke about his commute across campus to and from the parking lot as a favorite experience. He often made detours from his destination if presented with the opportunity to catch a new Pokemon or to participate in a raid. So gameplay transformed a liminal experience into an opportunity for in-game productivity and exploration. Pokemon Go also influenced players' knowledge knowledge and awareness of landmarks on campus. So wayspots highlighted locations in the real world that participants had often not noticed before. We've already talked about the backside statue. The game also provided a common language through which players could interpret and refer to these parts of the built environment. Some participants noted that there were Pokestops that they not only became aware of due to the game, but they also had not seen in real life. For instance, Kelly mentioned that she had never seen the real multi-faith language stick, which is a small location. It's a stick with a few different languages written on it, and it's located in the campus quad. And Kelly had never seen it, despite walking past it every day. She was only aware of its existence because it was a Pokestop. And she also noted that the inclusion of such landmarks in the game made her want to better understand their meaning. But what's interesting about that is that didn't translate into a desire to see this object in the real world. Many of the locations that were meaningful to participants were stops that they only became aware of through the game. Joanne mentioned that her favorite gym was one that was particularly valuable to her gameplay, and she often walked by it when she was walking to campus. This place became of significant value to her. In addition to showing players new places on campus, another common thread was how Pokemon Go became part of the experiential fabric of visiting a new or unfamiliar city. So in these cases, participants' experiences were often mediated through the app. Peter had recently traveled to Latin America, and he used this game to guide his exploration. He said, "I love it when I'm traveling. When I was down in Ecuador, I just followed. One night I would go in this direction, so I just followed all the stops out that way, and the next I would go another direction." Pokemon Go is a common tool for participants getting to know or explore a city while traveling. It often curated players' experiences and even helped orient them to these new environments. Though the game map does not contain street names, Kelly found the game interface very useful for navigating new environments. Kelly also kept Pokemon from every location she traveled to as part of what she called, quote, a Pokemon journal or diary of where I've been at what time. So in this way, Pokemon became important not just for their in-game value as fighters or collectibles, but also for Kelly as an archive of place. These are just a few examples of Pokemon Go's capacity for placemaking, and I've shown how the game encourages new movement patterns, changes in how players value a particular place, and how the game serves as a tool through which players come to know new places and environments. And in these ways, Pokemon Go shapes players' relationships with place. This way of knowing place, I argue, resembles a layer in a palimpsest, which is an ancient manuscript where fragments of the previous iteration can be seen showing through. Pokemon Go represents a reiteration of place, but only certain parts of the place show through on the game map. This layer of place meaning becomes part of players' experiences of place. These places have been identified as culturally and historically significant, according to the game creators' logics. Because Pokemon Go prioritizes permanent landmarks over other forms of in situ knowledge, so knowledge in place, the game logics amplify the power structures that exist, and they also delegitimize certain knowledges. One example being indigenous ways of knowing place. The impacts of these decisions are not neutral, but through examining the gaps in representation in the palimpsest, we are able to see how power constructs narrative and use the palimpsest as a tool for examining injustices in society. Here are a few of the works that I've cited in this presentation. As I mentioned, at the end of November 2021, this article will be published in Loading, the Journal of the Canadian Game Studies Association. So once that issue is released, I will link it in the description below. Here is the second slide of references. So I also want to say thank you very much to Dr. Satsuki Kawano and Dr. Tad McElraith at the University of Guelph for being the principal investigators on this project. And I also wanted to say thank you to Dr. Elizabeth Finnis at the University of Guelph for recommending the concept of the palimpsest, because that was a very effective way to think about meaning, place meaning. Thank you very much for watching this presentation. I hope you enjoyed it.